everybody. Nice to see everyone. I am Amy Rose Marsh, and I am the Vice President of Acquisitions and Artistic Development for Concord Theatricals. I am honored to welcome you to today's Read More Plays Club. Today's session, we have Aleshea Harris and Whitney White joining us to talk about Aleshea's brilliant play, What to Send Up When It Goes Down. This play is currently running in New York, live with real people in a real theater space at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, and is being presented by BAM and Playwrights Horizons in association with the Movement Theater Company. I had the honor and privilege of seeing it last Saturday, and it was an incredible experience. I know tickets are scarce, but I think I've been told if you show up at the box office, you may be able to get a seat. So if you are in the New York area, I encourage you to go and check it out. It's an amazing show and a wonderful way to welcome yourself back to live theater. Also, I just wanted to shout out, I believe there are some folks in the room affiliated with the New York production. So thank you for being here. We have some teaching artists and 4 students from the BAM Artistic Critical Response Program who are in this virtual space. These young people are reading the play and formulating, formulating an artistic statement and 20-minute theatrically centered critical response inspired by What to Send Up When It Goes Down. So thank you very much for joining us to today's discussion, and we look forward to your questions. In the next few minutes, I will introduce Aleshea and Whitney, but before I do, I wanted to take a moment to just remind everyone about how the Read More Plays Club works and the rules of the Zoom room. After I finish my introduction and read you some more about Whitney and Aleshea and all their amazing accomplishments, we'll have a 30-minute discussion about the play. If you have any questions that come up during this discussion, you can leave questions in the Q&A box, which is down at the bottom of the screen. And we'll be going through those questions at the end and elevating questions, or you're free to ask questions in the chat too. So this is obviously a digital space, and while we are closer every month, every time we do this, to getting in the same physical space together, we encourage you to use the chat box to create community by posting thoughts and reactions. We just ask respectfully that you keep things positive and supportive for these artists who have generously donated their time. So we love plays at Concord and we love theater, and we want to make sure that this space, this room, can be a place where people can be genuinely curious, and when we can create a community of art lovers. So after 30 minutes, I will jump back on screen and then we'll open the room up to the questions. We'll talk directly to Aleshea and Whitney, and then we will wrap it up. Couple more things before we begin. So if you'd like what you see today and you want to go to more Read More Plays Club and do more play reading and more artist discussions, we encourage you to sign up for the Read More Plays Club mailing list, which will drop the link to that in the chat. And then also, just if you want to learn more about Concord and the amazing body of work that we represent, great plays, great musicals, sign up for our regular mailing list too. We're picking up new shows all the time, and signing new artists and signing old artists, and there's a lot going on here. So join us. Also too, I'll point out now, Aleshea has built a wonderful digital resource around the play. So, and we'll drop a link to that website, the What to Send Up website, in the chat as well. So if you want to go to that website and interface with the play more, leave thoughts and feedback, you can do that. Check it out. Okay, and now I will read you more about Aleshea and Whitney, and then I will turn over the mic to them, or I guess there's no mic, but I will turn over the camera to them. So Aleshea Harris is an award-winning playwright. Aleshea's What to Send Up When It Goes Down had its critically acclaimed New York City premiere in 2018 and was featured in the April 2019 issue of American Theater magazine, and received a rare special commendation from the Susan Smith Blackburn Prize. The play is currently being remounted at BAM. Aleshea Harris is a 2-time MacDowell Fellow and has enjoyed residencies at the Hermitage Artist Retreat and Hedgebrook. Whitney White is an Obie Award and Lilly Award winning director, actor, and musician based in Brooklyn, New York. She is the current recipient of the Susan Stroman Directing Award and an artistic associate of Roundabout Theater. Past fellowships include New York Theater Workshop 2050 Fellowship, Ars Nova's Makers Lab, Colt Clure, and the Drama League. Whitney White holds an MFA in acting from Brown and a BA in political science and a certificate in musical theater from Northwestern University. So please help me welcome them. I think they're going to turn on their cameras and join us. Wait, there's Aleshea, hi. There's Whitney, hi. And now I will turn off my camera and leave. Thank you guys.
Hi.
Hi.
Nice to see you again. It's crazy to see you in this way. I just saw you in the flesh.
That's right. For those of you watching, I left New York yesterday. I left after the opening of What to Send Up, and I'm back in California, but so excited to be engaged in conversation with dear Whitney White. How should we start off?
I mean, how are you? Let's start with that.
I'm great. I'm excited. I'm thrilled that we have brought this piece back to life, to new life.
Yeah.
In a context. I'm honored that it's going up at BAM, and BAM have been really good to us, and I'm just thrilled to see it affecting audiences. Yeah.
Same.
How are you? Same?
I'm the same. I feel like we should talk about, it's just wild. Even when she was introducing us, she was like, it's playing in person. And in fact, you and I were just in the theater breathing the same air with our players. And I didn't expect that to have such a profound effect on me. I have to say, it was really unforgettable remounting this particular play in this time and the space that we just did it. So happy to talk about that as much as we need, but it was just kind of remarkable.
Right. What have you noticed to be differences between the first time that we mounted this work in 2018 and now? Like, what has shocked you and surprised you?
I noticed a huge difference in the cast, something I was very proud of. I found that all of our cast members were much more front-footed when they needed to take up space in this way. When they had particular needs, when they had an opinion, I feel like the very mature and beautiful, generous way with which they shared their thoughts and themselves with both of us, like really kind of took me back, and it felt like a real collaboration in that way. Not your typical, you're the actors, you stay over there and you just move and do what we say and we'll do this. We had so many issues to troubleshoot. I mean, social distancing, how do you do audience interaction? How do you do that safely with the new kind of regulations? COVID testing interrupting rehearsals. And so we all kind of had to put our like very adult thinking caps on. And that was very refreshing for me. It made the directing process a lot less lonely, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I was thinking a lot about how in the writing to hold space, or if it was necessary to hold specific space for what we all just came through. Yeah. And I think that what I landed on was the piece already does so much work to acknowledge disparity. And I think one thing I was certainly thinking about during COVID was like the health disparity between like how Black folks were being treated, Black and brown, folks of color essentially, versus others with regard to COVID. And like, should I put language inside of the piece for that? And decided against it.
I thought that was amazing how maybe Aleshea, you could talk about that more, how you assess this time we're in. Because I remember we had this conversation there. I don't want to give the show away, but there's a very beautiful opening to the show in which we're all required to be, let's just say, present with one another. And we discussed, should we accommodate more? And we landed on a no, and I'm so happy we didn't. Will you talk more about that?
Sure. Well, I think we were talking about, as I said, acknowledging the time that we're in and the things that have happened, but the work has a very specific goal. It is a ritual, a real ritual that's meant to bring something into being, which is the job of a ritual. It's meant to create a space specifically for Black people, a space of affirmation, a no gaslighting space, a space of celebration and catharsis around the issue of anti-Blackness. So if I have had these moments where I'm like, oh, should we talk about this? Should I add this? Should I do that? And I think the piece needs its specificity in order to do its job. So I've been resistant over the years, and again in this moment, to put something in there very specifically about this other thing. And it's like, no, but that other thing is actually captured in the language of the work as it exists already. So just letting the work do its work. What's unfortunate about this piece is that it is kind of timeless. I started working on this when I was still in grad school. 2015 was the first time it went up in a black box, like the early, like rough and tumble guerrilla theater version of it. And it still works, it still holds.
Yeah.
I mean, Trayvon Martin was my pivot, was my like, oh, hell no. And other people have theirs. And it's still, now we're talking about Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and so many others whose names we might not know. Yeah. But the work still works. And so I just want to let it do its thing.
And I think that's just a testament for all of you guys listening to Aleshea's brilliance. And I think the importance of the playwright, right? A lot of times when we encounter theater, we're encountering it in school, and we're encountering the writing of like deceased white male European writers, right? And it doesn't feel connected to the now, and it doesn't feel connected to what we need as human beings. Although I love the classics, I'm happy to talk about that on another day, but Aleshea is living in the now and responding in this way that makes her work new American classics and timeless. And in a way, I was just so grateful that you made that choice, because every day, everywhere we go, you go to the airport, you go online, you go to a restaurant, we're hearing about COVID and that all the time, but how often are we hearing about these very precious Black lives that have been lost and how we can celebrate them? And I was grateful to just carve out space for that on this piece. It just felt very important. Maybe we should talk a little bit more. There's something amazing too, that without giving it away, it's like there's a moment the audience has to be present at the beginning and a moment the audience is asked to be present at the end. And I've been honestly shook by how much I've been affected by the end of the show this time around.
Yeah, I actually think we can give things away.
Okay.
Hopefully folks have read the play.
Yeah, hopefully they read. Yeah.
So it's okay. And I didn't want to cut you off though. Is there anything you wanted to add?
At the end of the play, since we'll be specific, the audience is split up into Black and non-Black participants in a very loving, welcoming way. And they're split up and each group is given a benediction. And, it was always a glorious thing for me, a space of affirmation for me. But I find like the last 15 minutes of the play, every time I've just stopped taking notes. And it's like, I'm there because I need to be there. So something has shifted for me. And I was wondering if you felt the same and what that's about.
Yeah, I think that it's easy when you're in these trenches and you are a director or writer and you're there to like do your job, which is to be an observer, a person who's sort of managing the health of the piece, that you forget that like, I wrote this piece because I needed healing. I wrote this piece because I needed that affirmation. I needed no gaslighting. I needed someone to say this is happening and it's nuts. I needed the absurdity of it to be called out. And so I think the closest thing that I've had to what you're describing is those moments when I'm like, oh, when I have my note brain on and I'm going, oh, like what if this, if we, tweak this here. And then I go, oh, and I had this the other night with Alana is an actor in the piece. And she has these monologues about moments of intimacy or almost intimacy where she experiences anti-Blackness. And these are taken from my experiences. All of these are things that happened to me. And so she has all this language and she's dropping pieces of paper, like the stage is covered in shredded white paper by the end of the piece. And I just got quite emotional to see this young Black woman trying to shed, because I was struck by the remembrance that that's me. That's actually the language that she's using, and this thing that's happening is Aleshea Harris trying to shed, trying to heal from these experiences of anti-Blackness. And it's just the level of intensity is discomforting in healthy ways, I think, because then it allows for a kind of catharsis, because once I get finished being sad and feeling shook about about the truth and reality inside of myself of what I am bearing witness to, I'm in space with other Black people. I'm being affirmed. I'm being held. I know that Whitney's been through it. The cast members, we all get to speak about this, and it's nourishing and nurturing.
I love that. I mean, you brought up the paper. I feel like, there's a very spiritual part of the show for which I think we've been talking about. And it's what requires the audience and players to all be present in this moment around this great continuous tragedy that we are all witnessing and a part of. But there's also just structural freaking brilliance to the play. And Aleshea brought up one of the elements, which is paper. And I think it'd be cool if we talk about that, because the play is operating in three modes. It's operating in the world of facilitation, ritual, and also traditional theater. And I wonder, Aleshea, if you talk about how I still to this day, every time we remount the play, I'm like, how did she do this? And I've been working on it now for a while. And it's just like, these domino, you use the Jenga tower metaphor, but maybe talk about the piece and its structural parts and how you even landed on it in constructing it.
Sure. So to my memory, I mean, it's been years of, just to say a little about the journey, I started out with a version of this it's retained its shape, but there are things that I've added. There's a whole monologue from Maid explaining why she doesn't have any kids, for example, that's like quite heavy, quite striking, that wasn't there in the beginning. So I sort of set out knowing that I wanted to create something that was active, that was participatory, that was, I wanted to do something. I didn't want to passively receive something, and I didn't want the audience to passively receive something. So I sort of knew that. And then it was just the process of like drafting, redrafting, trying. I did the prompts. I'd experienced, maybe people in the audience and you, Whitney, have done this crossing the line exercise, where we're like, it's like an acknowledgement of privilege. It's like cross the line if, I don't know, if your family made a certain amount of money or something like that. So I decided to craft my own prompts. And the goal was to make anti-Blackness absolutely undeniable in that space. There's no way, because there are people in this space who will tell you they've had cops pull guns on that. I've had police pull weapons on me. You can't deny it, right? So if there's anyone who came here with that, it makes it undeniable. So I think structurally to start there is to lay this, well, actually it starts earlier than that with language that says this is first and foremost for Black people. So everything is quite intentional. To the goals that I stated earlier, which are to create a space of affirmation. And then, so there's a little language on the top, which was added because there was a performance where people were like giggling. And I was like, no, we need a little bit of seriousness. So that's there. Then we move into these prompts, which are escalating prompts asking like, have you ever experienced, and questions about anti-Blackness. Have you seen it? Have you experienced it yourself? And then we move into the more traditional theater piece. I think structurally, it made sense to me to start out sort of getting us in a brain space where we were acknowledging the simple truth of anti-Blackness, right? And then what does it do to move from that into a more traditional theater space? I think that if we start with the traditional theater space, it disallows something. We walk into the theater as individual human beings. We respond to these prompts as individuals. We really have to have moments of great reflection. And then we sit down in our seats. There's what I'm up to is trying to put folks in a certain psychic and spiritual space for receiving than the theater. You receive it quite differently. So it's all about thinking about like the cause and the effect, not just of what happens in a narrative, but what happens in an experience of a piece of theater in a room with other people. And then of course, at the end, we divide the groups, as you said. We've got the non-Black folks who we invite out into the lobby, where they read some language by myself and then offered some other things to look at with regard to anti-Blackness, places to go, resources. And then there's the circle with the Black people inside, which is a series of calls and responses and a moment for us to be with each other, speak more names if we have them. And again, this is quite intentional. It's about, somebody gave me, actually, I believe it was someone from the movement who suggested like, we need to leave the Black people with they need to feel held, right? This is a really heavy, intense piece. Again, easy for me to forget when I'm sitting down writing. So I took the suggestion and decided to take a few calls and responses that we experience inside of the play, which are for like negative things that people say about Black folks, and flip them into these positives. so that people could leave the theater feeling, and it made all the difference in the world. There's such a tremendous kind of joy. I mean, the feeling in the space when we go through those is remarkable, right?
I mean, this thing, Mr. Garrett Anderson put here, that it's so fascinating to think about making sure that audiences are present to receive and engage with the narrative. It is, and it's like not even fascinating, it's profound. And I have to admit, never before have I ever worked on a piece of theater, and still to this day, I'm working on a lot of theater. Have I ever worked on a play that was so focused on, let's get on the same page, whatever it takes. And we even added another element, precursory element before the facilitation, which is an installation experience. So you walk into the theater and you see all of these images of beautiful Black men, women, and children who've lost their lives to racialized violence. And then we go through this facilitation, and it's like, okay, now maybe we can watch all together and dive into what is the Black experience and what the effect of this idea that's expressed in the play of anti-Blackness, right? Of the dehumanization of the Black body, the idea of how that affects our lives and ends up with mortal consequences for many of us. And it's just been a fascinating thing, because when we started working on it, I was like, how is this gonna work? Is it gonna work? And I had to like turn off my theater brain, my like theater director brain that is like, okay, well, this is what you do for rhythm and this is how you bring about catharsis. No, because in this facilitation, sometimes things take as long as they need to take. So the traditional rules of theater, you have to just throw them out the window and just give in to the kind of energy of the group and the energy of the cast. And there's something just very, very brave about that structure. And then Aleshea's like, okay, let's shed that. Let's move on. Let's move into what? A vaudeville. So you go within the first 20 minutes of the show from the most honest kind of naked, no lights, human experience to something that's super heightened, an idiom that Americans in particular are super well versed in. And then you drop into this stylized performance.
Right. Those pivots are very intentional. I sort of have like the dramatics of urgency to me is like so critical to my work. I like, first of all, the issue we're talking about is quite urgent. So much of the language is pointing to this keeps happening, this keeps happening, this keeps happening. And so built into the structure of the piece is like, we go here and now we change and we turn a corner. And I like the way that you use the word shed. It's very important for the performers and for us as the collaborators on the piece to understand, like we do a thing, we have to let it go and keep going. And that this piece is not indulgent. Black people are not indulgent. We don't sit around going, people who suffer are not indulgent. And also indulgence is not dramatically interesting. If we can think about the sort of more Western traditions and modalities that we were both trained in as theater makers, is that people sitting around just feeling sorry for themselves is not interesting. What's interesting is watching people keep freaking going despite the effed upness of their circumstance. And so, and that's also true to the culture, right? That's true to, you know, take the scraps, Black folks, and keep it moving and make something extraordinary and beautiful out of it. So there's great rhyme with the truth of our experience and the way that I structured the play. I want to say really quickly that the installation, which I see people loving on in the chat, is the genius of Whitney and the designers. That is not written into the text. They looked at this material that I'd written and understood what I was trying to do and helped me to do it better. And that is, that is a good collaborator, folks. If you're a playwright trying to figure out who to work with, you want to work with folks who can look at what you're doing and help you to achieve. I want to talk a little bit about, Whitney, about dramaturgy that doesn't exist on the page. Because this work, I think that your brilliance, one of the many things about you that is brilliant is that you understand that dramaturgy doesn't just live on the page. You have tremendous cultural competency. You understand that there's a dramaturgy of the body, Afro-diasporic, the body, and of sound, of sonics. You understand that for us, story doesn't exist on a page, that in Afro-diasporic culture and other cultures, world cultures, that it exists orally. So can you talk a little bit about, that's quite general, but I think you'll have
now you can make me give my secrets away. And that was the sweetest thing you've ever said. Thank you. That meant so much to me. I mean, okay, just to keep it real, you know, the theater business is very much similar to the way it used to be in the 1600s. It's a business of patronage and assistantship and fellowship, right? You learn through apprenticing and fellowships, and then you eventually get your own experience to direct. And I had the fortune of assisting so many directors I really respect, but I remember I would time and time again, even in graduate school, like a little dramaturg, some brilliant person would come in and have spent months putting together all these resources and give them to the cast and walk us through it. What does the play mean? What does the language sound like? What are the politics of the world? What is the history? What are the historical facts? And we'd all sit around at a table, and then the actors would get up and then it would just go away. And I'd be like, what? The play is right here. And these dramaturgs would bring such a kind of 3D understanding or concrete understanding of the possibilities and implications of the textual world. And then I would just see directors completely shed that and be like, well, I think it's this. I'm like, well, actually 300 years of history says it's that. So it's like, I love what Aleshea said about dramaturgy of the body, because knowledge isn't always just written, especially about oppressed peoples, right? And so I find with Aleshea's work, really excellent writers, their work can handle rigorous interrogation of meaning, history, and kind of the convergence of ideas that have led us all here. We are all, not to sound like a Marxist history thing, but we're all part of a dialectic of a history. All of us here are here because of things in the past that happened that brought us here. And having no knowledge of that when you're coming into this kind of work is useless. Yeah, I could make up my own ideas. I remember, Aleshea, you said this to me early on. You're like, yeah, that's a great idea, but it's not what this is. And so I realized the first time around we were doing this that I had to get smart, and not just smart, I had to look forward and back. What do we sound like as Black people? What does celebration mean? What does libation mean? What does it mean to mourn? What are practices that surround grief in Africa, in Eurasia, in Hawaii, all around the world? How do brown people grieve? What does that look like in the body? Like, how can it sound when they're singing? And so, I don't know, it was I look back on the kind of way that we made this play and finding ways for the dramaturgy to live on the stage as some of my happiest moments directing, because it was such a kaleidoscope, such a collage of Black experience and brown experience. For example, there's a physical vocabulary in the show that Aleshea and I were very inspired by hakas, right? Which is done by the Maori people. And it's a war cry. It's a style of movement and song that just channels so much power that's so similar to African practices surrounding burials and wedding practices and grief. And I'm like, wow, look at this thing that's just across the continent, and they're doing the same thing as us. So I don't know, it's just like an endless world. Aleshea's, I feel like that's why we need to do theater, right? It's not a Google search. Like, you don't Google search, how should I do this? And then someone pops up with a YouTube video for you to do it. You have to find your way through it and attach meaning and knowledge. And that's like the power of the playwright in these kind of modern times we live in. It allows you to find dramaturgical and historical understandings and explore it in the now. That was a really long answer, but yeah.
That was a beautiful answer. I want to speak really specifically to that question about STEP, the STEP dance art form, which a lot of Black Greek organizations do, but has its history, of course, on the continent. Because STEP was a part of, way back when I was directing it before I met Whitney. No, I don't want to disrespect past Aleshea. She did what she could.
Yeah, she was amazing. If there was not her, we would not be here now.
That's true. But that STEP was a part of the vocabulary of the piece back then. And then STEP is a part of the piece now. I don't know that we talked about it. There's also a Carrie Mae Weems piece that came out years ago. And then of course, Beyonce's, when she did the Super Bowl halftime show. So I'm just like, that's the kind of dramaturgy I'm talking about. Why are Black folks drawn to STEP when we're thinking about social justice and the loss of Black life? Like, that's the kind of thing that like gets me super excited, is like, we were both drawn to STEP. What is it about the power of body percussion, of like using the ground that feels so right for this. I mean, I don't think this is a question for us to feel like we have to answer. It's just useful for me to pose alongside a study of this work, as well as around like singing song, like what is a moan? What is a Black church moan? Inside of this context, we have a beautiful singer named Denise, a cast member named Denise, who sings, and it's gorgeous. And there's dramaturgy in the way that she uses her voice. I didn't write those riffs. Denise, you know what I mean? Denise is just a genius with her voice, and she is practicing along a continuum of Black. She's heard this sound. She knows this sound. She may know it from the womb, but that's the kind of thing that I'm like really excited about. And I think that folks will miss if they think about this work as just these words on the page.
Right.
This whole like mountain of history beneath this, I mean, any work. And certainly with this work, you have to sort of have a kind of cultural competency to understand the like who made the like song at the end, how it works.
Which, by the way, Aleshea wrote all this music. And I think I shiver for other playwrights, because I feel like when I read an Aleshea Harris play, the bar is like, oh, you think theater is coming in and paying $80 for a ticket and having a little piece of candy in the dark where a bunch of people in a little light dollhouse do things and then you go to dinner afterwards? Let me tell you something. Like, every play that she writes challenges the relationship between the viewer, the performer, and the subject of the evening. And What to Send Up was just like, I was like, woo, I had to start going to the gym when I was first directing that play, y'all. I had to go to the gym, okay? Because it requires such an amount of presence. There is music, there is dance, there is like channeling of the spirit, and it's not a game. And it's like, oh yeah, all theater is supposed to do this. Why do we let some forms of entertainment off the hook, you know? It's supposed to make us feel alive and interrogate the very world we live in and how we got here. So it's interesting. I highly recommend you guys read Is God Is and Aleshea Harris's other piece, which was directed by our dear colleague Tavy Magar at Soho Rep, and this, because you really do get a kind of education in what theater should be. I highly recommend it. It's like, if I were to teach a course, I would teach like Is God Is, What to Send Up, and then like Hamlet after you read those plays first, to understand how there's things in dialogue, but how there's new things happening now.
That's very sweet. Y'all, I did not pay her to say that, but I sure do love the, that's really sweet, Whitney. Thank you.
Oh, you're on mute.
Anyways, are we good on time? Should we?
Oh yeah, questions? Shall we question?
Yeah, I can come back in. I just turned on my camera.
Great.
Sorry to pop up like that in a creepy way.
Right.
We do have questions though, and I think actually listening to you guys chat is kind of fascinating and intoxicating. You've answered a few of them organically, which is really cool. But then a couple of them kind of get into subjects that you touched on just in a little bit of a deeper way. So going back to, here's the first question, going back to the lobby display. So can you talk a little bit about just like how that idea was developed, how you selected photographs, and then someone is also asking, will this display travel with the show? Is it something that other production companies can adopt for themselves? Or do you have recommendations on how they would do that?
I'm gonna let Whitney speak. Go ahead.
Okay, I think first of all, like, I have to shout out to our designers. I'm going to be typing their names in the chat because you should look them all up. We had a beautiful, beautiful scenic designer named Yushen Chen. And okay, so, you know, we're theater people. Me and Yushen, we're like little theater losers. We get the script, we're like, we're gonna do all this design, lights, it's gonna be like this. And we sent the first kind of proposal through, and Aleshea was like, this is not what it is. And then we were like, okay, we understand now. And so we were like, all right, this is an experience focused on the human body, and we need to prepare the audience. And Yushen went away. She has this beautiful way about her. She's a scenic designer, but also a visual artist. She makes these incredible, everything I've worked on with her, she leaves her own mark on it with her own hands, which is a rare thing. You know, there's not just other people building her stuff for her. She will touch the set, she will hang the pictures, she will build the things. And there's something very artisanal and rare about that as we get into this highly automatized kind of age that we're in. But so she went away. And we started thinking, okay, this isn't church, while it is a form of ritual. This isn't a funeral, although we are celebrating the dead. This isn't a museum, although we would like to give people information. It's not a school lesson, although we have things to teach. And so we started thinking all these, it's not this, it's not that. And so we went through this process of it's not that, and we started landing on the image of a stained glass. And that also came from our lighting designer, Chassis. And I love stained glass, even though you typically only find it in very kind of Western religious worship spaces, but it is beautiful, and the light shines on you, and it shines through the images, and it gives you this kind of pause in a beautiful way. And so we started collecting images and saying, well, these are our saints. These are our people we are celebrating. What if we make this kind of constellation of images in this way? And then our lighting designer supported that with lighting, and our costume designer, who's also a fierce activist and warrior in her own right. Her name is Queen Jean. And our sound designer, Sinan, all kind of became warriors in this effort. And the installation does tour with the piece. It's constantly growing, and it does tour with it.
As far as if it can be accessible to other places, I had not thought about that. But in the same way that the music is sort of written down, I think honoring the work that you all did, along with the work that Whitney and the designers did, that says this is what our installation looked like feel free to use it as a source of inspiration for your production. I think that that's a good idea.
I do too. Because I need it every time. And I've seen the show how many times, but every time I leave, finish tech, I leave the theater and I come back, and I need a moment to get into the space too. So it's a great inquiry. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, another question, kind of related, but also about symbolism. Oh, my dog really likes the show. I don't know if you can hear my puppy. She's chiming in. But can you delve a bit more into the meaning and symbolism of those pieces of paper that are drawn? The circle and paper used in the play. And then I actually, kind of an extension of that, are there other symbols beyond paper that the audience should look for that maybe are on the page, but seeing them visually is kind of an experience or deepens the experience?
Yes. So the paper is something that is written into the text and as a part written into the experience, and really it's a rhyme with like pouring out libations, which certainly goes back to the continent. It's a way of honoring those who have passed on. And it's also, the dramaturgy of it has expanded for this production, because now we're thinking about it as like cushioning for the body of the person who falls during the production. So by the time that character who's being followed throughout the play is killed, the ground is covered in this paper, and so it cushions the body. It's as if the play knows this is, which of course the play does. The play speaks a lot to being in between these losses. And so the play knows that someone is going to die. And so it's sort of creating a bed as it goes, a bed that's born of the experiences of the other folks who are trying to shed them to cushion the body of this person who dies.
Yeah.
As far as other symbols, there's the circle, which I know Whitney and Yushen came up with. Do you want to talk about the circle?
Yeah, I really, I love these things, the paper, the red that Aleshea put in there. The circle for me, we're caught in a loop. A loop is a circular thing. I also think that most Western theatrical practices and like stories that we are all steeped in are beginning, middle, and end. They're linear, right? Once upon a time, there was a princess, and then she got kissed by a prince, and then there was a witch, but then everything was fine, right? But in almost every other part of the world, storytelling is not just beginning, middle, and end. It's like your ancestors did this and you did that, and then back to the ancestors. And so there is a more womb-like kind of different structure to it. And so the circle for me is a callback to the nature of the play, which uses repetition, and also just to remind people there are other ways to tell stories. American theater, there are other ways to tell stories, and they have been around forever. And the circle also is just like, we can't escape it. So it created like a boundary for, it's like, once you're in, it's on. So if you notice, if you go to the play now, you'll see a lot of little micro shifts the actors do when they're outside how they play versus when they're inside. And it's also a white barrier. It's a white barrier that's containing these players. Another kind of symbol or object in the piece is the love letters, which is, to me, again, one of the most beautiful ideas of the piece. Because again, Aleshea's made a play that is calling for action and thought. Like, come on in, be a part of this, step forward, be a part of it, and then also write a letter. And every night, what the audience does, how they participate, lives on in the show forever. And I think that's why it's so beautiful that Aleshea has this writing that's like, please don't do any harm, because the energy you throw down, what you send up when you come see this show, the actors absorb and it ends up on our walls. And so I love that image, and maybe Aleshea will talk about it more.
Yeah, so the love letters, that prompt wasn't there in the very beginning. But I have been thinking a lot about what I need. It feels like it makes sense for this piece to write from a space of remembering that I'm a Black person. What do you need? You know, just like keep it super simple. And I needed affirmation, especially from other Black people. So it's tricky. The love letters are quite tricky because we invite everyone to do it. But I do think I also need folks who aren't Black to be reflective, and that's what that exercise allows for. So maybe a letter from someone who's like filled with guilt isn't as useful to me as someone who's just like, I see you, Black woman, from another Black person. But it is still useful for that action to take place. As far as symbols, I want to talk just for a minute about the costuming, because I remember writing in like the first version of this, like, that people enter the space and they're dressed to the nines. And then I repeated it, to the nines. It's always been very important to me that people be well-dressed inside of this piece. For one thing, I think culturally, African Americans, well, diasporic people, my mother is from the Caribbean, we like to get dressed. It's a thing, it's political, it's real, and it's like, what are you wearing? It's a deal. It's like a big thing that I don't think is necessarily prevalent in every culture. And so that was there. But also there's a little bit of respectability politics tied to that. There's a little bit of like, people won't treat you as well if you aren't well-dressed. And so I wanted to kind of mess with that. And I knew I wanted to have people who were well-dressed, women in heels, men in like slacks, who like disrupted with their bodies notions of good behavior.
Yes.
So, Black people like being in, like, I'm in a dress, but I'm stomping, which is what you will see if you come to BAM and see this production.
Especially our women. I have to give a shout. We have some warrior women up in this play. I was so proud of us, Aleshea, the other night, because I was like, I would still be acting had I found this play, because the women are able in their heels and lip gloss to just unleash. It's like a thing. Like, shout out to the women of What to Send Out When It Goes Down, and what Aleshea's talking about.
Yeah, they go hard. So Queen Jean dressed them brilliantly and beautifully. And there's something like certainly at play with the costumes in the piece. It's important.
That's funny. I've totally noticed. I sew, and those suits are so well tailored. Like, not that I want to, but I'm always like, the tailoring is so good. It's so true. We have a few more questions. I want to make sure we get to as many as possible. This is a really interesting question. Is there an audience capacity number that you think Aleshea works best for the play? I mean, is there a production of this that's too big, or can you see 200 people going?
Yeah. Before Whitney jumps in, because I can tell she has a thought or many, I will say that I think I did a production way before we met Whitney at Occidental College, and there were hundreds of students, and it just kind of took a long time to pass. We were passing a microphone, I think, and it just added, 20 minutes or so to the show. So I love the idea of many bodies. And I know Whitney has strategies for like how we could handle such a large audience. I think it's just managing allowing everyone to have their space to speak just takes time and energy. So it's pushing, how much of that can we do without sucking the energy from the actors who need to move on to the next part of the ritual, right?
Yeah.
Right now, our capacity is what, Whitney?
Well, we've done it with up to like 97, 100 people. In
Right.
DC,
Right now
we
it's
had
less with COVID.
right.
Go ahead.
At BAM, it was first it was 52, and I was like, come on, y'all. And then we got it to 62, and then at Playwrights Rising, it should be around 90 again. But I'm trying to dream with Aleshea about how we can expand our circle, because I think that there's a way. I think that it will take focus and experimentation, but I'm very interested in that because it just gives me something that's so real, and I know it gives other people things that are real, and that's worth sharing. And it's very rare that you have, it's very rare you have a real cause as to why something should be shared, as opposed to just, oh, we got the critics pick, or some rich producer wants to do it. No tea, no shade. We need producers. It's theater. It's a poor medium. But at the same time, this piece needs to live on because it literally needs to live on, and people need it. And so we're scheming that up. Currently, though, if you are in a community and interested in the piece, I would highly recommend 100 people. 40 to 100 people present.
Yeah, I can't wait. If someone does a production with like 1,000 people, I'm like, just like, seems like there could be some crazy inventive things going on.
They're working on it.
Yeah, it's like the stadium production. Going on, so here's a question. As this piece is catharsis for what you need as a Black woman, that's something you said earlier, Aleshea. Can you talk about how the piece has healed you, or writing, has it healed you?
It has healed me because, for one thing, well, I will say that I always said to myself, Aleshea, this is your ritual, is being the person who sort of shepherds this work. You're not going to get on stage. So that's been healing. And a big part of that healing is just being in space with other Black folks who are theater makers, just being in a room where there's so many of us and it's a Black space. That doesn't happen in the theater. The other folks, other Black people in the room are saying the same thing. I'm not in rooms like this. So it is healing. It's affirming to hear other people's stories. It's affirming to like work, together and rehearsal, like whatever it is, just to be steeped in the culture and to be normalized, because what's happened a lot of times along my journey as a young Black theater artist in undergrad and in my grad program or what have you, was I was the only one. And you just start to feel a little like displaced. So to feel placed, to feel at home and absolutely normal is incredibly healing. Thank you for that.
I mean, girl, that is 100% it. Have a place to belong, have a space to be yourself. And as it turns out, you're not alone and you're excellent. I mean, for me, just coming in and seeing Aleshea, like Aleshea is excellent. These players are excellent. They are some of the best technical performers I know. And I've worked with lots of people in lots of stages. So there's just something about not feeling displaced and also being in a room of other just brilliant Black creatives that has been life-changing for me.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna love on Whitney for a second. Like, she is such a generous and gifted human to have leading my work. Like, I feel so honored and loved just to have someone be like, no, your work deserves better. We're gonna do this. Someone who's rigorous and picky and bossy in the best ways. Like, it feels good. It feels amazing. Yeah. I've worked with directors who were kind of like, meh, shoulder shrug. They didn't understand the spiritual importance of a thing like Black people are dying. Like, can we get around?
I need you to care. Yeah, like I need you. Yeah, and that was also with go ahead.
Whitney brings the care and the skill, right? So she's dope and she gives many Fs and it's wonderful and healing to the question.
Thank you.
It's actually been, it sounds like I'm closing out, I'm not, but I just want to say how fun it's been to watch you guys, because the love and the collaboration is so obvious just when you talk. Like, I mean, it's actually a total honor to watch you guys communicate and talk about ideas and then show love to each other too. So thank you for that. Just a few, I think we have time for about 3 more, so I'm gonna fire them away, and then we'll close it out. But at the end of the piece, when speaking to the white audience members, how do you decide who should read that final provocation to the audience?
So I'm just going to correct, a gentle correction. It's non-Black audience members. It's really important because sometimes people forget that. It's like not just white people, it's non-Black folks. The way that we decided this time was, I think BAM put out like a soft call to people in their community who were not, so we want a non-Black person to read it. And folks who volunteered, I think the kind of person who would hear that call and volunteer to do it is the right person to do it. Somebody who's like, I want to be the one to, at the end of this experience, read these words to these folks, is the person to do it. I don't know how we'll do it in the future, or to be honest, how it has happened in the past.
But don't you love that? Like that the work, I mean, look at that. The work is inviting in professional actors, community organizers, people who feel the call. I mean, there's that alone, I always forget that, Aleshea, like that alone needs its own article that we're like, do you feel that this is your task? Come and do it. Theater is such an exclusive, and all kinds of theater. Black theater can be just as exclusive as anything else. It's such an exclusive thing that can make people feel like they're on the sidelines. And Aleshea's finding a way to just make this work for everybody, even work that's made for Black people first. It's still for everybody. And that's, it's quite powerful. Yeah. I always forget that, Aleshea. That's like another thing I need to be talking about more, that it's like the piece is still asking people to participate, even to the very end of it.
Here's a question about the movement. So this person says, I've only seen the show live and not on the page, and I'm super curious how specific the text is in capturing all the subtle shifts in the show and the movement and choreography. Did you work together to solidify the choreography? Do you have to do specific rewrites to capture those shifts? How did you guys, how was that built, those movement moments?
That's a great question. So there's some things, there's some indications in the text for like what happens in space, but I didn't even try. For one thing, I was writing sort of to myself. I was directing in those early days, right? So I knew, okay, at this moment, they're gonna start doing this song. I know how the song goes. I know the feel of the thing. So I didn't feel the need, and I also felt it was kind of impossible to capture that in the language of the stage direction. So a lot of it isn't there. And then as far as like choreo, Whitney did, she came up with it for this production herself, save for like this, there's this action that happens that's been in the play from the beginning that I came up with, this moment of like body percussion. But again, this is not written into the text. So I don't even know, maybe it isn't necessary, but I'm also like, how in the world would I tell someone who's doing this in New Orleans that like there's this body percussion? We're talking about that and ways of creating like a guide.
I'm about to contradict her, because like everything that she wrote is necessary to me for the show. And it doesn't matter if you might not use every element, but you need to understand why Aleshea made those elements. Mm-hmm. She is putting this thing on, it's mirroring a heartbeat. It's mirroring the rhythm of the play. It's keeping the body, tapping on the body as like now mainstream. I love that when mainstream therapy like accepts something that like Black people have been saying forever, everyone's like, oh my God, epigenetics is real. Trauma can live in your veins. And we're like, yes, we know. But like everything that Aleshea's done in the piece, Aleshea's written a system of songs. She has very beautiful, specific stage directions that indicate what kind of rhythm, that it's not casual, that it's not this. And then I went in and worked with the actors to choreograph the movement, but the description of the movement and the type of movement it needs to be in order for those moments to work is very clear. And so I think that Aleshea's giving you these elements. And so it's like, if you're going to remove one, you better put something else in that same spot so that the Jenga tower stays full. So choreographing the piece was like, I mean, geez, like probably one of the most thrilling things I'll ever do. I don't often choreograph. I've really only done it for this and one other show, Are You Dead, Drunk Lord, because I felt close to the movement. But like, because Aleshea gave me such specific ingredients, it just became clear like what kind of vocabulary to use. So I would say for artists who are interested in interpreting the text, it's not the kind of show where you just cross out the stage directions. It's not that kind of a show. They're not even stage directions. They're living words that are required to make the piece work. And then you have such a fun obstacle there.
Thank you for that correction, Whitney White. I'm just gonna say that I know we have a couple, we want to get to questions. I just want to say that I do feel like the play is a very delicate kind of spell or recipe. And if you start to mess with things, I use the metaphor as she's mentioned of a Jenga tower. You're moving pieces from the Jenga tower and it doesn't hold, and you might be like, why isn't this working? It's because you've taken things out that are there quite intentionally. So thank you for reminding me that everything is with great intention, Whitney. I really do appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm really glad you guys said something too, because sometimes as a licensor, there's always a question about, oh, can we change material or what can we manipulate? So it's a good reminder that like everything is intentional and it's very purposeful, and do the play as written. So I appreciate that. I think we have time for one more question, although there's a couple of good ones. So I feel, thanks for everyone for coming, and I'm sorry if I did not get to your question, but this is a big one, and I think it's a good one to close out on. So Whitney and Aleshea, personally, what are you sending up while it goes down? It's like whatever that means to you. Yeah.
I feel like every night I'm just trying to say I love you to a Black person who's no longer here. That's what I'm sending it up. Sometimes there are people in my own family. Most of the time they're the people that we're honoring, but I'm sending it up for those who are not with us every time. I don't have anything else in my life that lets me do that. So that's my answer.
I understand that this work cannot right the wrong of all these people passing over. So I don't seek to try and make that cute or okay in any way, or to use that to bolster myself in any way. What I want to send up is, as a myth maker, a new mythology which challenges the myth of anti-Blackness, that we belong here and that we should live fully to the edges of ourselves. We should love ourselves and each other, and that there's nothing wrong with Black people. Everywhere you look, it's subtle. The messaging is subtle. It's blatant that there's something inherently wrong with us, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with us. So that's what I want to send up, is the idea to the living and to the memory of those taken too soon, that there's nothing wrong with us, that this is a great, tremendous, and terrible crime, and that we belong here essentially, and should do the best we can to experience joy while we are here.
Thank you. I'm glad I asked that last. That's a beautiful note to close out on. And I just want to say a huge thank you to both of you for, donating and being so generous with your time and kind of shedding light on this text and the current production with BAM and Playwrights Horizons and the Movement Theater Company. Go see it if you are in New York City or one of the tri-state areas. Drive there. I think there's still a way to go to the box office and get tickets. And it is incredible. It's an incredible piece of theater, and I think we're very much hoping that this blows up and you can see it in every city, in every town, and not even cities, like in every space possible. So I just want to, send a heartfelt thank you for your time and for being with us today. Before we wrap up too, I'll just send a reminder, if people had a good time today, please sign up for the mailing list. We're going to be doing more of these, and I'm actually going to announce the next one that we don't have a date and time, but you can buy the book and start. So July, I was like, what month are we in? I forgot. July is going to be Karen Zacharias and Native Gardens, her fabulous play. It's a comedy. So join us, buy the book, start reading that. And we'll have a great discussion about that play. And then,
thank you.
Yeah, and check out, we'll drop the BAM production link in the chat, what to send up link. And is there anything else you want to remind people? Or?
Yes, I want to say, even though the show may look like it's sold out at BAM, you may still have a strong chance of getting in if you show up. So show up, come to BAM and wait. And if it's sold out and close to start time, you may be able to get a ticket. So that's what I want to send out.
Yeah, that trek to Brooklyn, or if you live in Brooklyn, it's way worth it. Yes. So thank you so much, everyone. And we'll see you at the next Read More Plays Club. Thank you for joining us this lunchtime. And yeah, see you in July. Thank you, everyone. Bye.